Welcome to Souhan Unfiltered at SouhanUnfiltered.com. This is Jim Souhan, your host for the evening. We're quasi-live at Devil's Advocate Bar in downtown Minneapolis. I'm here with Sean Bernard. Coming up, a conversation between me and Twins assistant general manager Rob Antony. I've known Rob since 1993. He joined the Twins as a PR assistant, I think in 86 or 87, basically right before they needed the extra help to go win the World Series. Rob grew up in Minneapolis as a high school pitcher. He did not get the college scholarship he thought he was going to get, and that ended up being the biggest break of his life, and now he's the assistant general manager working right next to Terry Ryan on all the big decisions made over there. It's kind of a great Minnesota story, and Rob tells a lot of great stories about a lot of great Minnesota figures. Kirby Puckett, Terry Ryan, Tom Kelly, Kent Herbeck, and he tells you about his favorite moment in baseball, which does include champagne. I want to tell you about the upcoming lineup on SouhanUnfiltered.com. We're going to start doing shows at the local and Kieran starting on Wednesday nights at 5, starting December 3rd. First one, December 3rd at the local, Glenn Perkins is going to join me. December 10th at Kieran's, Gary Loris, the leader of the Jayhawks, who also does a lot of original work and a lot of solo work, is going to join me. Maybe play a couple songs. And he's playing a show with Haley Bonar on December 11th, so he might bring her along. He might just come along with his guitar. December 17th, Roy Smalley, the great Twins announcer who played for the Twins, will come over. And Roy's one of the best storytellers in the business. Usually when we get together, he tells me things I've never heard before. He promised to do that again on December 17th. And we'll have a bunch of other podcasts up between now and then. Tonight, though, let's get to the stories with Rob Antony. Again, Rob Antony, assistant general manager, and I'll let him tell a story. All right, Robbie, this place doesn't exactly remind me of the Metrodome. We're sitting up here, fourth floor, overlooking the train yards in downtown Minneapolis. I don't think you had much of a view of the Metrodome, did you?
No, there wasn't much scenery in the Metrodome, and in fact, when I come in every morning into this place, I could take the service level all the way to the elevators and take the elevators up to my office, but I refuse to on a daily basis because it reminds me too much of walking through the bowels of the Metrodome, so I choose to, whenever possible, walk on the fifth floor, which is the concourse of the stadium, and so that I can look out on the field every day and not take anything for granted and realize how good we've got it now.
Now, when I started covering the Twins in 1993, you guys were talking about the PR staff, because you started as the PR guy. You guys are down, you talk about the bowels. I always hate that phrase, the bowels of the, But in this case, it was actually true. You guys were down by the kitchen, pretty much.
Yeah, our office was wedged between the restrooms and the kitchen and the press dining room, which we used to have our Christmas luncheons there. When I first started with the Twins, we'd have luncheons there, and that was our company Christmas, our holiday party. And we'd get together, and it was just the employees, and man, they jammed the tables together as close as you could. It was hard to move, but the chef would make a prime rib, and we'd have a nice luncheon. And actually, some of those were some of the best memories because it was just the employees, and so it was very laid back, and for a couple hours you just got together and you laughed and you talked about things and whatnot. But I think obviously you couldn't do that anymore. Number one, we have a much, much bigger staff now as we operate Target Field and everything else. But a lot of things have changed, and now we have a really nice holiday party every year. And it's just different. It's changed a lot over the years.
Well, it's got to be. You said it's a bigger business than it used to be. It's a bigger staff than it used to be. I mean, you probably aren't as encouraged to get drunk and hanging by the chandeliers anymore, right?
No, I don't think things get too out of hand. Not too out of hand. They always announce at the beginning if anybody does feel like they've had too much, we're happy to provide a cab ride home. But I'm not sure too many people have had to take them up on that. But it is a nice outing. It's a nice deal. We bring our wives along, and sometimes that's one of the few times that they get to see some of the other wives, and other than maybe seeing them at spring training or something. But it's a nice gathering, a nice event, and it's only about a month away. I can't believe it's already coming up on that.
Wow. Now, you got in, 86 or 87?
87 I started.
And that was a PR intern? Is that the right phrase?
Correct. I started right at the beginning of August of 87. What happened is the intern that was in PR at the time went to St. John's, and school was starting up, so he had to leave. Well, now all of a sudden the Twins are in a situation where they might make the playoffs. Things are really picking up, and I was interning at Care 11 in the sports department, and Jeff Passolt and Randy Shaver recommended me to the Twins, and so I came over here and started the internship in August of '87.
Passolt and Shaver. The names are kind of familiar. What happened to them?
I think they're still hanging around somewhere around Minneapolis. You might catch them on a couple different TV stations these days.
TV. That explains it. That's why I haven't noticed. It is, I want to get to your personal history too, but it is remarkable. Baseball in the 80s was, I don't know how to describe it, but because it was a big sport nationally, it was very popular, but the day-to-day baseball operations felt almost like family businesses. And now, and I know you still work for a family business, but this feels like more than a family business. Now, the TV money's exploded in the industry. Almost everybody has a beautiful new ballpark. Salaries have skyrocketed. What's it been like to just see that transformation?
It's very different. The one thing that we're very fortunate here in Minnesota with the Twins and this club is that it's still a family-run business. And there's not many of those left in sports in general. It has become such big dollar, big business. But when you look back when Calvin Griffith owned the club, this was his business. So he had to run it like a business. And there were other clubs that, very wealthy people, it was a hobby for them. It was a toy for them, and Calvin had to run it to try and make a profit. That was his business. And when the Pohlats purchased the club, we've always operated off of the simple break-even basis. You know what? We're not trying to make money, but at the same time, we're not in the business of trying to lose a ton of money every year either. And as things have evolved with TV and radio and more money getting put into the pot and the pool and stuff, and now with Target Field, there's just more revenues and more resources for us, and our payroll has gone up with it, and they've been very good about affording us the opportunity to go out and try and improve the team. All we need to do is justify it and explain why we want to do what we want to do.
Well, I think that one answer covers everything we need to talk about in terms of money. I mean, I just think the money issue gets beaten to death every day. I appreciate that answer, but I want to turn it away from the business of the game and talk more about people. That's what fascinates me. And the one great thing about baseball is when you have like a great character, you see him every day. Mm-hmm. And you were a PR guy when Kirby was in his prime. I covered Kirby kind of toward the end of his prime. You have a favorite Kirby story?
Yeah, I do. Every spring training, we would go down to Fort Myers starting in '91, and Kirby and I just had sort of a deal in place, and I didn't even have to say much about it because he was a guy who always understood the role that the fans played, and he was always great about signing autographs and everything else. Well, the first day or two of spring training, you'd have guys who might be their first time in camp, or we might have got them from other places, and they're trying to skirt around where all the fans are, and they're trying to sneak by without having to sign autographs. And so Kirby, about the first or second day, would come in, and all the players be in the clubhouse, and Kirby would look around and he'd say, "All right, that's all right, bitches. I got you. I'm heading out there. I'll sign the autographs. You guys just sit back, relax, have a little lunch. Puck's got it covered." So Kirby would go out there, and those guys all of a sudden start looking around. They're embarrassed because the best player on their club, one of the best players in the game, is out there signing autographs, doing it the right way. Pretty soon you'd see about 10 other guys out there, and from that day forward, the rest of the spring, nobody was trying to dodge the line of autograph seekers or anything else. They learned that to understand the value of that, and Kirby would just shame them into that. And Puck was great about it because he truly did enjoy that. He enjoyed talking to people. He loved, when the kids would get excited, he'd take a picture, do all those things. So he was a great ambassador for this club and really did care about the fans. And that's, to me, what a leader is the guy who leads by example. And if people aren't picking up on that example, he wasn't afraid to let them know, this is how we do it here in Minnesota. This is the way the Twins do it. So people talk about the Twins way. I've never been a big believer in the Twins way. I think there's a right way and a wrong way of of doing some things. But when I think about the Twins way, Kirby, Herbeck, Gaetti, Blyleven, Gladden, a lot of those guys really set the tone for the right way to play the game, and that kind of became our mantra, or the way that we want it done in this organization.
I remember when Molitor first signed with you guys in '96. He comes into the clubhouse, and here we have two future Hall of Famers, Puckett and Molitor, completely different approaches at the plate, completely different personalities, and Puckett is walking around just yapping at people. I mean, he doesn't pass a locker stall. There are 80 people in camp, and he doesn't pass a single person that having a comment for him. And Molitor, after a couple of days, kind of looked at me or somebody else and said, I appreciated that there was a lot of quality in what Puckett had to say. I had no idea of the quantity. And what struck me, because I covered football, and football, there's a certain amount of almost anger built up in football players, especially in that era, and because they weren't even very media savvy. There were just guys who were in pain all the time, And so the first time I ever covered baseball on a daily basis was Twins in '93. And I kept on asking other people on the clubs, are there Pucketts in every clubhouse, or is this guy completely unique? And what I came to find was, he was pretty unique. Just the sheer level of the energy was unmatched.
He would come through, and that was one of his things. It wasn't something that he intentionally tried to do. It was just his personality that came out, and he wasn't that way when he first came up. He was a yes, sir, Mr. Herbeck, Mr. whatever. He was very genuine, respectful, and everything, and that's the way he believed a rookie was supposed to be. And then as he became an accomplished guy, then the true personality got to come out. And he was a guy who, when he would do that, he'd go by and have comments for everything. He would stir everything up. And if that clubhouse had any chance of being down that day or quiet or whatever, no chance. Once Kirby came through, all of a sudden people are laughing, and he's taking shots at people, and people are taking shots at each other and just getting involved. And that's when you develop that atmosphere, that energy in the clubhouse, the enthusiasm. And anybody who's worked in a stale environment, you know how boring it can be no matter how much you enjoy your job. The day gets long. But when you have personalities and you have people that you enjoy seeing and being around, that's what makes it fun. And I really believe that was such an underrated part of why we were successful. And even we went through some low times, but he made them bearable. And there were some other people who, just because they love the game and they love being around their teammates and their buddies, it's kind of like after you graduate from high school and you go off to college and you're not with some of your buddies that you grew up with and hung out with. Now you make some other friends or whatever, but you still miss. When you go back home, sometimes it's like you never missed a beat. Like you might not have seen them for a year or two, but when you see them, it's just right back to the way it was. And that's kind of the atmosphere that Kirby and some of those other guys created in the clubhouse.
What are some of your other favorite personalities in the game that you've been around?
There were a lot of different. I like a wide variety of people. I like the intensity that Gladden brought.
Yeah.
He was
and the hair. I mean, you can't match the hair.
Well, and then he had to have the thigh wraps because he had skinny legs, and he had to look stronger. So he'd wrap his thighs. He'd have the shorts, the compression shorts, to make his legs look bigger, and the tight pants.
I need some of those.
And you had Jeff Reardon, he never would talk to anybody on the other team because he did not want them to know that he was a nice guy. He had the persona of being this mean sucker out there on the mound, and he wanted to maintain that. You had Frank Viola, and the running joke with everybody was who's going to mature sooner, Frank Jr. or Frankie. And I'm not sure we ever figured out which.
Still a race.
Yeah, still a race. But he was a great guy to have around, too. And Puck had a lot of fun with Frankie. Frankie took a lot of heat from a lot of the guys and stuff. And, with this thick New York accent and everything, it just all added up. But there were so many different personalities and different guys. Greg Gagne, he was a beauty. He would say things, when he'd come up to you and say, Rob, I think I got this figured out. I'm going to go up to the plate, and there's going to be nothing in my head. I said, wow, that's a reach, Gag. You sure you can do that? He said, No, I'm not going to think about nothing. I'm just going to go up there, and then I can't mess myself up. All right, that's great, guys. I mean, you can't even explain to people sometimes, and you think, man, if you could write a book and you could tell people all the different stories and different things, you know.
Well, why write a book when you just put it on my podcast?
Or I can try and condense it into a half-hour podcast. But there were great personalities there. You know, then you'd get the wacko guy, Mike McSudy, and the bug eater.
I remember the bug eater.
Yeah.
I remember TK not being real thrilled with the bug eater.
No, you get some of those guys that are off the wall. But you know what? When you talk to him off to the side, he was a pretty good guy.
He was.
You know, had a couple occasions to have a beer with him. And
Bad breath, though.
I didn't get that close.
Bug breath.
Oh, bug breath.
Yeah. Or bad breath.
Yeah. But once again, I never watched him do any of that.
I didn't either.
But just the stories were legendary. But, you know, it's always fun to have some of those guys. Another guy that I liked having around was Brian Harper because Puck had so much fun with Harp, you know, and you would just go the back and forth and the Herbecks and those guys that, you know, Herbeck's the guy that if he's your neighbor and you didn't know he played baseball, you never would have known. He just...
But you'd know from the athletic build.
Well, that... You would know that he's a fisher and a hunter, a fisherman
and a lawnmower,
and but he's one of those guys that you know you can sit and talk about anything, and that was one of the nice things is you have a lot of guys. Jim DeShays was a guy that he always sat in the seat right behind me on the plane, and we never talked about baseball, you know, but anytime he'd say, "Hey, you ready?" Jimmy, hey, I'm like boiled ham. I'm always ready. That was his standard line. I bet he used it 50 times in a season. But, you know, just different guys. And Shane Mack, Pedro Munoz, you think back. I think back.
Booger. You got to like a ball player named Booger.
Yeah. Munoz. Tom Kelly couldn't say Munoz, so he'd say Munoz, which sounded like something that you'd be congested with, so he became Booger.
That's a baseball nickname, man. That's the way it works.
Isn't that flattering? Hey, Booger, come here. So, and as time has gone on, you see players change, and you have different guys. I enjoyed Morneau when he was here. I enjoyed talking hockey with Morneau all the time.
Well, that's because he wouldn't talk about anything other than hockey.
Well, you know, you talk about what you know most about.
Yeah.
And he supposedly was a great hockey player. Which
did anybody other than Morneau tell you that?
I never verified that. I always told him, I said, that's bull, because if you were a great hockey player, I'd be watching you in the winter, not in the summer. So you obviously weren't that good a hockey player.
Who's a better hockey player, Morneau or Koski?
Well, it depends on who you ask.
Yeah,
Koski will tell you that he was a fantastic goalie, and Morney talked more about his hockey idols and guys that he liked, and he just loved being around the hockey players. You know, we'd have 5 guys from the Wild in the clubhouse on any given day, and guys coming out taking early BP with our guys and stuff, which I think it's fun. I think it's great. I think it's good for, you know, some of the atmosphere and the environment, and I'm all for the sport crossover stuff. So
I just had a story pop in my head, only because I'm old, I can't get it exactly right. I want to say that one day Koski comes out of the shower in the Metrodome, and Stelly is standing on top. Rick Stelmazik, the old bullpen coach, and quite a character. I want to say he was standing on the center table in the clubhouse in full goalie gear, just waiting for Koski to come out, just to get a laugh. Of course, the way my mind works, it might have been the other way around. It might have been Koski doing it to make Stelly laugh, but I think it was Stelly doing it to Koski.
There were so many things that, over the years, you had guys who dressed up in an ape suit, hid in the bushes, and it's dark when you're coming to spring training in Fort Myers, and they jumped out and scared Jerry White. He started screaming, and he looked like a scared little kid trying to run away.
And they always got Jerry, who was a coach also with the team. They also got Jerry with the fake snakes all the time.
That, and at the Pfister Hotel, which is supposed to be haunted. And so we get there, and somebody goes up to Jerry. They get the key to Jerry's room, and they go up, and they take a bar of soap, and they write boo or welcome Jerry on the mirror. So when he gets up in the morning, takes a shower, looks at the mirror, and he sees this, he slept in the lobby of the Pfister the next 2 days. He didn't tell anybody. and Carlos Gomez and Alexis
I remember
Casilla,
Go-Go being...
They had their own rooms. They stayed in a room together because they were both scared because they had heard all the stories. So, it's unbelievable. Some of these
Lord.
guys.
And if only we could tell all the stories we know. But I don't think that's... Even a podcast, I'm not sure we can get away with that.
No, and I think there's a lot of people who probably wouldn't appreciate it.
No, they wouldn't. And we got to go back to Gladden, too. Because I didn't cover Gladden as a player. I missed him as a player. I only got to know him as a broadcaster and a coach and everything. Did he actually, as he's accused of, have a jacket that said wrench on it?
Absolutely. It was one of those knit jackets, twins knit jackets, and he had wrench written across the back. Nobody else had anything on the back of the jacket, but he had wrench on the back.
And where did wrench come from?
I wish I could tell you, but I'm not exactly sure. But he thought it was pretty cool, and it made him look pretty tough.
Oh, man. I love Gladden. God, he's a beauty. A combination of, like, toughness, humor, and he's just got one of those... Baseball humor doesn't always translate into real life. Like, there are times people would make me laugh in your clubhouse. I go try to explain to somebody else why they made me laugh, and it didn't make sense. Gladden's one of those guys... He kind of between two worlds. You know, he can kind of make you laugh with baseball humor that actually translates to the real world a little bit.
Yeah, he's a fun guy to be around, and there's so many things that happen that you sort of have to be there to really appreciate it, and you have to know some of the players. The Juan Berenguer's with his briefcase that everyone wondered. He had a bunch of cans of beer in his briefcase, and what is the guy in the trench coat and the top hat with his briefcase? What's he always? I don't know what's in that briefcase. Jesus, it was beers that he'd just take on and off the plane.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's brilliant.
That's Wani.
You do have to, the guy with the trench coat in 100-degree weather is always up to something. And I'm glad it was beer.
Yeah.
And when I covered the Vikings, Chris Dolman would always carry a briefcase in, and finally one of his teammates pried it open. There's like an apple and a newspaper in there. You know, he just wanted the damn briefcase. That's all he wanted. Tom Kelly. Really an interesting character, and since he's gotten out of managing, you've seen his personality open up. To me, he's a great broadcaster because you see so much. But anybody who's around TK, if you wanted to be able to function near him, you kind of had to have a breaking in period, or you had to kind of know how to approach him. For me, that meant getting there really early and letting him talk about other things other than baseball, and then eventually getting around to maybe what you wanted the point to be. What was it like for you getting to know TK as really a young guy?
Well, one of my big breaks in this game, I went down, we were still training in Orlando, staying at the Court of Flags Hotel. I had no vehicle, so I could walk to Denny's, or I could eat in the hotel bar every night. And I was rooming with, I believe that year, Jerry White for 3 weeks, who I had never met in my life. So we meet, we're roomies for 3 weeks, and I went to Denny's that day, and I'm walking back, and a car pulls up alongside of the road, and it was TK. He said, "What are you doing, son?" I said, "Just going back to the hotel, just had a little dinner." He goes, "You want to go to the dog track with me?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." It was an opportunity to get out of my room for a night instead of just going back and watching TV and hanging out every night. So we went, and we ended up going to the dog track a handful of times that spring, and then as time progressed, when we got down to Fort Myers, we had the Naples-Fort Myers Greyhound track there, and there were springs where we probably went at least 30 nights a year. It was a daily thing. He would just walk by and he'd say 6 o'clock or 5:30, which meant he was going to be out front of my place at 5:30, and we're going. We'd go up in the clubhouse, we'd have dinner, but those car rides, it was about a half hour, and the car rides there and back, we would talk about everything. Some baseball, some personal stuff, whatever. But I learned more about baseball and thought process when it was just him and I could ask him any question, and it wasn't a stupid question. It was, he would explain, and I'd say, what are you thinking in a situation like this, or even if it was a spring training game or whatever, and just pick his brain. And from this uniform side, I've never learned more from anybody than TK and from Terry Ryan on the baseball front office side of things. Those two guys, everything is a step or two ahead of everybody else. TK could talk about matchups, and even during the season, we'd go on the road, and we'd have an off day, and Boston, and we'd go to Remington Park. I got a car, we're doing this. He would just tell me, he'd just let me know. And I remember running into Don Zimmer at the racetrack one day, and you sit and you listen to those guys talk, and it's just those experiences and people who I truly understood that the less I talked and the more I listened, the way better off I was going to be, because you just learned so many things. What I had to contribute, they've forgotten more about the game than I'll probably ever know. And TK he talked about the fun times of going up against the LaRussas, because he was a guy that they could try and match wits. They knew what the other one was trying to do, so it really became a chess match, trying to get into their bullpens, trying to bring this guy in because they're going to announce this guy, and I'm going to get this guy out of here, but I'm going to save Bushy because he's going to be available against Eckersley, and just talking through all those different things. He really, really understood how to use his bullpen and to use his bench, when to use guys. And we were one of the teams that could face Randy Johnson and roll out Jeff Rebele. And
Rebele killed Randy Johnson.
It was unbelievable. He would roll guys out, but they would be ready to play because he played them enough.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew how to keep Al Newman sharp, and he knew he could count on Newman anywhere he put him. And, using Randy Bush, I'm going to put Bushy in right field because I just need to get him some at-bats, but I don't have the DH at-bats. And, we would talk about some different things, and he would talk out loud to me. He would really be thinking about what he was going to do the next day, and he would be, but we'd be talking about it, so I'm just listening, and, he'd ask me questions which would challenge me, and I'd respond, and sometimes he'd just look at me and say, that's a pretty good answer. And other times he'd say, well...
It's high praise from TK.
Yeah. And other times he'd say, well, you could do it that way.
In other words, you're wrong.
In other words, you're wrong. Or I was thinking I might do this, or you might do that. But it was entertaining for me, and it was enlightening, and when you look back, I don't think people realized at that time how great a manager in baseball mind he was, until he gets done managing, and you look back and you start comparing what he did with the talent he had. Mm-hmm. When he had talent, I always said if we get into the playoffs, we have a chance to win this thing. And both times we did, because he was the type of guy that you get down to it. It's just like Jack Morris said to some of our players in '91. He was struggling. He wasn't pitching very well at a certain point, and he said, "You guys get us there, I'll win it for us." I mean, you can say and make all those kind of comments you want to make, but he actually backed it up.
Right.
And TK, in my mind, was the type of guy that if you got into a situation, he could win games for you. I'm not sure managers can always do that. If you don't have the players, the horses, it's pretty tough to do. But TK was a guy that if you gave him enough talent, maybe not as much as the other team has, but enough, he got the most out of everybody.
Let's pull the camera back, too. You grow up in Minnesota, you play high school baseball, and all of a sudden you're learning baseball from Tom Kelly, spend a lot of time with him, both professionally and away from the field, and then you transition from public relations to learning how to scout from Terry Ryan. I mean, that's pretty remarkable stuff.
It is. I've been extremely fortunate and been given a lot of different opportunities. And, it started off, I used to do some research on some arbitration cases when I was in media. And it's flattering when Terry Ryan comes and asks if you have interest in switching over, changing gears from media and public relations, which I geared myself towards, to getting into the baseball operations. Well, I got into baseball. If I was going to do public relations, I'm not sure if it was just some company that I didn't have a particular fondness for or have any passion for. Okay, it would be a job, and there's nothing wrong with it. But I wanted to be part of and around baseball. When I got in with the Twins, I would be terrible in marketing or in advertising or in promotions. There's just a ton of people that are way better at that stuff than I am, and I wouldn't be excited about it. But when it comes to the baseball end of it, that's where I have my passion. And learning that from the Terry Ryans, and you'll find like the Mike Radcliffes and Vern Followells and some guys that we have in our organization that are tremendous scouts, really, really talented people. A lot of times you have to work to pry stuff out because there's no recipe, there's no secret formula to scouting. And some of the best advice I got, I spent some time with Earl Frischman, who's been a long-time scout with us. He's a pro scout with us now, and I went to some amateur tournaments with him when I first got into the baseball ops, and he said, just let the game come to you. The longer you watch it, the more you see who the better players are, and then you sort through, and then you start comparing them to other guys, and it's really a comparative analysis. You're looking at this player, and that way you don't get caught up in the big fish in the small pond. You can go to any baseball game, watch a game, and say, that kid right there is the best player on the field. That doesn't translate to him even being a college player. It just means he's a good player compared to everybody else he's out there with. So I was fortunate enough to go to Australia and Latin America and see a lot of the young ones. I'd go to Australia and see under 18 and under 16 tournaments, and you're watching kids that are 14 years old, and you're projecting what their good bodies are going to look like, what they're going to be like. And I spent a lot of time with Howard Norsetter, who's one of the best in the business at identifying and really being able to project players what they're going to be, when their body matures and everything else. I learned you start looking at their parents and figuring out maybe kind of what their bodies might look like. That doesn't always work. We signed James Beresford, who's still in our organization, and he has battled his whole life trying to keep weight on. He's about 175 pounds. And he had a brother, Simon, who was about 6'3", 245. He was a pitcher, and he was a beast. And we always thought, geez, if James, Dad's a pretty good-sized guy, and when James grows out, fills out, he might end up moving from short to third, be a power-hitting guy. Well, he's went from short to second, lost a step, and he's a pretty good hitter, but not a power guy, and he's never had power. So it doesn't always work that way, but, you learn a lot of different things. You keep your ears open in the stands. You hear people talking about people. And all of a sudden, a player you might be there to watch, you hear that, he's lucky he's playing after what happened at school and different things. So there's just a lot of things that go into the scouting world. And I've been fortunate to work with the Jim Rants of the world, Jim was a wily veteran who did everything in this game and played hockey and baseball at Minnesota, and he's through and through, Mr. Minnesota and everything else. And I learned a lot from him about just the patience part of things and running the minor league system, the value of building relationships with affiliates, all those types of things. And so I've been fortunate to be around and work with so many good people. And I guess that's one of the benefits of staying in one organization and having the stability that we've had. And when you work with people, you also look and you think, if I'm ever in that position, I think I would do things differently this way. So you take all the good and you look at some of the things that you would do differently, and whenever or if the opportunity ever comes, you're prepared to do things the way that you want to do them, but also learn from the people who've been successful before you.
Well, I always tell people the three baseball people I've been around extensively who just, to me, see things that other people might not see are Tom Kelly, Paul Molitor, and Terry Ryan. They're the three guys who jump out at me. And obviously, you kind of, Terry groomed you and brought you along here. Everybody knows about Terry's work ethic and about his expertise, but I'm not sure everybody knows that he's a character. You got any? First of all, can you do a Terry Ryan impersonation?
No.
Come on.
I can do some of the looks and some of the mannerisms, which will not play on audio, but he is a guy that when he gets going, he can have the place rolling. And it's just like Tom Kelly. When you look at Terry, the public usually sees him the serious side. You rarely see him smile. He's a guy that does enjoy life. He enjoys being around people, especially that he's comfortable with. A lot of times at the winter meetings, you grind through the day. It gets to be 10:30, 11 o'clock, and he's, all right, nothing else is going to happen today. Everyone's gone to bed, or a lot of people go down to the hotel bar. A lot of times we'll sit up in the suite and have a few beers at the end of the night, and he'll get going on stories about when he got his car stuck in Louisiana and had to pay the trooper to help get him out of there, and he gets to the game in time to see a player. He's covered in mud. And, the first game he went to on his Harley-Davidson motorcycle, and an old veteran scout called him over. He had long hair, if you can imagine that.
I can't, but I've heard the story.
Comes in on his motorcycle, and the guy comes over and he says, "Son, what are you doing?" he's got a ton of stories, and that, the people that have been in this game so long, and what amazes me is that a name will come up and he'll say, I can call this guy about him. He can call anybody from other organizations. I don't know how he knows everybody. He can call a AA manager for some team who I've never heard the name before, and he says, I've met him a couple times. And when he calls and talks to him, you can just hear the respect. And the person on the other end of the line is like, wow, Terry Ryan's calling me for my opinion or my advice, and it's like, a sign of respect. And he's always up front. If somebody calls and wants his honest opinion, he's not going to steer him the wrong way. And I think that's why a lot of people like to deal with him, because of his integrity. It means more to him to be respected and to do things up front and honestly than to, trick somebody or withhold some information and fool somebody in a trade or something. He wouldn't feel good about that at all. He would rather just, hey, look, this is a good baseball trade. I think it works for both of us. If you're on board, let's go. Let's do this. And, it's full, complete disclosure. And so the integrity part of that, I think, is why Terry's so well respected. And when he had his health issues a year ago, you couldn't run into anybody who wasn't asking about him and wanting to pass along their well wishes, from an usher at the stadium to everybody from other clubs wanted to know how he was doing. It's
remarkable how well he treats people at all levels. Everybody he runs into, really. And I did a lengthy piece on Terry, I can't remember, maybe early 2000s. And three things kind of jumped out at me, the stories people told about him. One was that he could name almost any song, any pop song that came on in a spring training ballpark or any ballpark. He could name it within like 2-3 notes. He just nailed it. You can confirm that one?
Absolutely.
And the second one I remember is somebody told me a story, and this gets to Terry just being, while he has a sense of humor, he also has that serious, it's got to be done right side, that he rented a car. He tried to return it early, and they were going to charge him extra for returning it early. So he said, well, okay, you want to play by the book? And he went and drove it another 800 miles and then returned it?
Oh, no, or you're well short.
Really?
Yeah, he drove it a few thousand more miles. He called the car company back and said, do you want me to get the oil changed? They go, no, sir, you can just return it. And basically he was going to return it after 5 days, and they wanted to charge him a daily rate instead of giving him the weekly rate because he didn't keep it the full week. Well, the 5 days was more than the weekly rate. So he came back out, and Mike Radcliffe was waiting for him. They were going to drive back to Minnesota. He said, never mind, I'm keeping it. He drove back to Minnesota. He drove all the way down south. He circled back around, and about 2 weeks later he dropped it off. And they looked at it about 3 times because they couldn't believe that the odometer was right. And he did. He called him. He said, you want me to get the oil changed? He said, hey, look, it's your own fault. I put all these miles on. I tried to return it. You didn't want to give me the weekly rate? He is a man of principle, and he is stubborn. Man, yeah, he's stubborn, and there's a right and a wrong. There's no question about it. And you know all his catchphrases. Everybody's a bird.
I'm not on that bird.
Not on that bird. So we all have his mannerisms. The glasses flip when he takes the glasses off, has a disgusted look, and flips his glasses in the air that land on the desk and starts shaking his head. That ain't right. No.
I remember I was trying to get him on a radio show at spring training ball, I think Sarasota, and you guys are all sitting up on the stands watching batting practice, and we just couldn't get the phones to work. And finally I went up there and I said, Terry, I wanted to have you on. I apologize for keeping you waiting. Our system's horse bleep. And I think Terry turned to you or somebody else, Radcliffe, and goes, horse bleep. I've used that word a few times around here. The other thing is he has it's almost like being a savant. He can look at a ball player, an anonymous, 25th guy on the roster ball player in spring training wearing a pullover 300 yards away and know who it is.
Yeah, process of elimination, because he figures out who this is. I know that's that guy. I can tell from this guy's swing. That's who that is. So that must be this guy that they just brought up here from AA. I bet that's who it is. That, or they just brought a minor leaguer over from minor league camp, because
good Lord.
That's the only other guy that could be. It is unbelievable. He can his mind never stops. It's sometimes hard to have a conversation because he's thinking about something else, or sometimes it seems like he's got ADD because he cannot help himself when you're talking about something. You might be talking about something serious, and you go, "Can you believe this shot this guy takes? There's 3 seconds left. He's gonna arch. He's gonna launch this 3-pointer from 25 feet. If he looks down there, he's got this guy down below. They're only down by 2. Why would you?" Never mind. Forget what we were just talking about. He just got wound up and mad at some college basketball player who just threw up a brick at the end of the game when he had a guy wide open.
He is a beauty. And in our business, you always have to ask the pertinent question, the topical question. But the best times about being a beat writer or being around a team are the down times when you're off the record and you get to hear stories, you get to hear what people really think, and that's when Terry's at his best. It's too bad the whole world doesn't get to hear those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just to go back to your roots, you went to high school where? Where did you grow up?
Patrick Henry. I grew up in
Okay, that's right. It was Minneapolis, yeah. And did you have a chance to play college ball?
I actually signed to play to go to Minnesota Morris, and the coach who put the whole package together was let go that summer, and the new coach called and said he'd honor the stuff for the first year, but he was going to recruit his own people, and so therefore I wasn't a great player. I knew I probably could play Division II or III or something, but I wasn't going to be a professional athlete or anything like that. So, and quite honestly, we couldn't afford for me to go and pay the full freight. So I ended up living at home, going to the University of Minnesota and commuting. And it was just something that we could afford and was more feasible and made some sense. So that was the end of my baseball career. Played a little park national ball, a little amateur ball, but more got into the college stuff. Played some intramural football and softball and some different things, and tried to enjoy as much of the college experience as possible.
So not going to Morris probably put you in a position to get the job at the Twins, right?
In a weird way, that I wouldn't have gotten the internship with Care 11. I wouldn't have gotten the job with the Twins. So sometimes things just work out for a reason, and it all is. I've been very, very fortunate.
Let's wrap this up with some quick ones. Maddest you ever saw Tom Kelly?
Oh man! Anytime Dennis Bracken asked him a question.
Hey, Bracken has that. Bracken, by the way, is an editor now at the Star Tribune who used to cover some baseball, and frankly, Bracken has that effect on everyone.
Oh, no question. Here's a quick story. When I was a freshman in college, I went with Dennis Bracken. I called him up. He's covering the Minnesota North Stars, and I said, "Can I shadow you for a day? I'm in journalism. I'd love to be a sports writer." So I meet Dennis.
Let me guess. He said, "Oh yeah, come on out."
Yeah, we could do that. So I meet him at Met Center. We watch the North Stars practice that morning. And we get done. I go, "All right, what do you do now?" I'm thinking he's going to go back. He's going to write. He goes, "Well, I got to go home and rake some leaves."
That's so Dennis.
And then I'll be back here for the game. If you want to just meet me like about 5:00 tonight. And then we'll take in the game and I'll write my story. And he got me. I got a pass so that I could go down. And Bill Mahoney was the head coach of the North Stars, and they won. They were off to a tough start at the beginning of the season, but I think they beat the Maple Leafs 7-3 that night. And so we go down, and Dennis ticked him off too. It's hard to believe that Dennis asked a question that fired up the head coach, and he lit into Dennis. Dennis is like, geez, guy's such a hothead. No.
Dennis once told me there's no such thing as a bad question. And then I said, "Dennis, all of your questions are bad. That's the definition of a bad question." We're teasing Dennis. We like Dennis, but
absolutely.
But Dennis could make Tom Kelly turn red by entering the room.
Oh, there's no question. And the thing is Dennis, I don't even think he really sets out to try and irritate people. He just has that effect.
It's a gift.
Naturally, it's a gift.
All right, maddest you've ever seen Terry Ryan?
Oh, I don't know if there's one time that I really saw him lose his cool, but he gets frustrated, like all of us.
Yeah.
And why did we do this? Or, he'll get upset about individual things, and, we tease and joke about, 2 pitches into the game, pitcher will throw ball 1, ball 2. He's not ready. Good God, he was not ready to pitch in this game.
The funny thing is, and you've been on both sides of it, media always gets lambasted for overreacting and jumping to conclusions. The funny thing is, I know all people in every front office in town, you guys all jump to conclusions too. It's just you don't say it out loud. You don't say it in public.
We laugh and joke about it many times where a columnist will just go off after somebody.
Yeah.
And they'll be, oh my God, is that awful? Man, what a hatchet job. And we look at each other, geez, we were just bitching about the same stuff. So, yeah, that happens.
And do you have a favorite baseball story or favorite story of any kind that you haven't already told?
I'm not much of a storyteller, Jim. I'm not very good about it, but...
All right, then favorite moment. You've been in the game. You've been around 2 World Series championships. You've been around a lot of good stuff. And favorite moment?
Yeah, I think probably after 1991, I was trying to do my job. I was trying to get players out from, you remember the back room where it was off limits to the media?
In the Metrodome, yep.
And that was the dining room. Well, that was also where a lot of the players ended up gravitating after Game 7, and the celebration was on in there. And I was going in, and I'd pull a player out and get him back out to the media to talk to him and stuff. And after about the 4th or 5th player, Chili Davis grabbed me around the waist, lifted me up onto his shoulder, carried me back in there. He said, "You're done working. You've done your job. Now it's time we celebrate." And he pulled me back to the room. He shut the door. He handed me a bottle of champagne and said, "Here we go. We got it done, buddy." And that was a pretty cool thing for me. It was, from 91, from the time I got to spring training, I was at every spring training game. I went to every home and road game that entire year, every playoff game. So it was like I lived every minute, all the ups and downs, the 15-game win streak. I was named the director of media relations on June 1st, and on June 16th, we won every game. We went on a 15-game win streak, and after about 12 games, I said to TK, I said, "Hey, do you ever remember a manager in baseball who was named and won like their first 12 games?" And he looked at me, he goes, "Geez, I don't know. I guess you'd have to look that up." He goes, "Well, why? Where are you getting at?" I said, "Well, I was named manager of media relations on June 1st. We haven't lost yet. So that's 12 straight for me. We went on to win 15." So he started laughing. We had a chuckle about it, but probably just that celebration in 91 and some of the laughs on the bus. Gagney was hilarious. I just remember different times when we got ready to go to the Sky Dome in Toronto, and we were a terrible road team in 87, and in 91 we were better, but still not great. And we went and we took care of business in Toronto, but after that Game 5 in Atlanta, we just got killed. And Steve Bedrosian came up, and he had some line that, and I wish I could remember. This isn't going to work because I can't remember the exact line, but he had everybody roaring, and it was like, we're going to win these next 2 games. We're going to win this World Series, because it just felt like 87, where we had the right group of players, characters, and people who weren't scared to perform. Some people, I really believe there are some players that are scared to succeed. I think they think about it so much that it starts to overwhelm them, how they're going to handle it, what they need to do to maintain it. And there are other players that just, when it starts to happen, it feels natural, and it's now I'm doing what I believed I could do all along, because they had the self-confidence, and I think we had the right group of players. Those 2 years, obviously, we got it done, but I think so much of it was personality-based and just their mindset and makeup.
Yeah, it's fascinating, because that's my favorite thing as a sports writer is getting to know players well enough that you can kind of see that, and numbers are important, statistical analysis is important, but there are some personalities who can handle the tough situations, who can handle expectations or pressures, and there's guys who just can't.
Yeah, and I remember now the Bedrosian line was, he gave up some runs and it got out of control, and we just got whacked in the fifth game of that playoff series. And he walks up and he goes, "Did you see me gas Clancy?" He struck out Jim Clancy, the pitcher for
And that's one of my favorite things. I'll wrap it up with this. That's one of my favorite things about baseball is there's so many games you don't have to treat, even in postseason, you don't have to treat any one game like it's life and death. You can actually laugh after a game. You can't do that in the NFL.
Yeah.
You can laugh after a baseball game. And I think we have many times.
Oh, no question. Randy Bush laying in the clubhouse. The media is not allowed pregame. And I believe it was 87, and we had, I don't even remember before what game it was, but we were on the road. And somebody goes, "Hey, Bushy, if only one team could win today, us or the Saints, who would you pick?" And he sat there, dead face. He looks, he goes, "Come on, man, don't make me choose."
Mr. New Orleans. That's
Yeah.
awesome. All right, well, Rob, I appreciate it, man. We will do this again sometime in the future after you've thought up all the stories that you wanted to tell this time.
All right.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.
All right.
And that is Rob Antony, Assistant General Manager for the Twins. I traveled a long time with Rob when he was the PR Director of the team. Now he's the Assistant GM. Now he's a big shot, but he still made time for the little people, or at least one little person. And I do appreciate that. We could probably, if Rob and I get together again, we'll probably come up with like 30 completely different stories than we had that time.
I love it that he said he wasn't a storyteller after each.
I know. He gives an hour worth of stories. That's why I'm not a storyteller. He's trying to be modest. It is amazing the stories you accumulate on the beat. It is a traveling circus. When you're on the road with 25 baseball players, front office, all the support staff, the writers, the media. It's amazing what happens. It's amazing what happens that you can tell about, and it's amazing the stuff that happens that you may never be able to tell about. But I think I will do a future episode on my favorite interactions with athletes. Some of them very friendly, some of them not so friendly. But I think I could do a whole show on that topic.
Oh, I'd love to hear them. I mean, I like the inside scoop on a lot of these stories. I mean, Terry Ryan, as a fan, I've been incredibly frustrated with the Twins ownership. You know, the new regime here, but it was so cool to hear that Terry Ryan really, really knows the players and the farm system. And, you know, if you're thinking about these I call them kids, but, you know, they are kids. And they're 20, 21, 22 years old. And they're looking at organizations to go to. And I'm sure in Minnesota they think about it, oh, it's going to be cold as hell there. But just to be able to say to them, we're going to know who you are in the Twins organization. You know what I mean? We're going to know who you are.
Well, I think the thing about Terry is, I mean, there are a lot of organizations that compartmentalize, and they have like maybe the general manager, a big picture guy, he's a decision maker, and it can work that way. It can work. There are all kinds of different structures that work. What is fascinating about Terry is he really will watch every minute of batting practice and pregame warm-ups for every spring training game. I mean, he just watches everything, and he remembers everything, has an encyclopedic memory, and when it's time to like make a trade for somebody's Class A left-hander or something like that, he probably remembers seeing the kid 3 years ago.
Well, and what's amazing to me is that, you know, just the different roles for different general managers in different leagues, that many of them you can see their business acumen, but they must kind of look at you in the Twins organization and say, what's your baseball IQ? Because this is going to be a very short conversation if you don't absolutely love this game, if you're not passionate about it, if you don't eat, you know, sleep and breathe the game.
And that's the other thing is these guys work incredible hours.
Yes.
I think Terry's cut back a little bit from his first tenure, but, I mean, you talk about the scouts, the GMs, the assistant GMs, even the PR people. I know they all used to work like 80-hour weeks. I think they've cut back to like 60 or 65 for a lot of them. But the amount of time they spend, the amount of knowledge they bring in, I think one of the greatest challenges of that job is not to be overwhelmed by all the information because they accumulate so much of it.
I just can't imagine being a new employee there and, you know, an up-and-comer and then looking at the work ethic of the people around you and their passion for baseball. I mean, it'd be a little tough to enter a room and try to actually contribute to a conversation as an upstart. Oh,
absolutely. Because you look at that hierarchy, you got Terry Ryan, who's a workaholic. You got Wayne Krivsky, who's a former GM and a scout at heart. Mike Radcliffe, who's one of the hardest working people I've ever seen. Rob, you know, worked like 70 hours a week as a PR guy, and then he went to baseball operations and worked more. They are just always working. And I'm not sure I could keep up. I really don't think I could keep up. I much rather be in the media, not work as hard as them, and then just get to rip them.
That's the way. That's the dream.
And Rob knows how. Rob knows how I am. He just wants me to kind of get it right once in a while. That's all.
Well, you speak your mind, and that's what it's all about. What's cool is that it's clear that they respect you, or they wouldn't have you in the room. What I love about this interview, as a fan, is he forgot the microphone was on. It really just seemed like you two, shooting the shit and having a good conversation. So it was fun.
Yeah, it was great, and I hope we do. We're going to do a certain amount of appearances. Again, like we're going to have Roy Smalley, Glenn Perkins, Gary Loris of the Jayhawks. My first 3 appearances at the local and Kieran's. But I'm also going to sometimes just take the phone and put it on a table and talk to somebody and hope they forget they're talking live, like today. So again, thanks to Rob Antony, thanks to Sean Bernard, and we'll be back soon on SouhanUnfiltered.com.
Looking like a train wreck, wearing too much makeup, burden that you carry.